what is happening with Israel and Iran, and what are the like wider implications that we might see as a result of the tension that's currently underway, speaking on the 16th of June.
Okay, speaking on the 16th of June, first of all, to everyone watching or listening, if we do have a nuclear war imminently, I'm not coming on next week. So I'm just flagging that politely in advance. I'll be I'll be hopefully gone. But let's begin with the specifics of that, and then unpack it and try and explain how that fits in with everything else, because it does fit in with everything else that I was talking about. So given that we currently have the fog of war and events are moving at incredibly rapid speed, what I'm saying could be potentially out of date by the time people are listening. So I'll try and keep it as broad as I can to make it as relevant as it can be. And that is that what we have at the moment is a paradigm shattering, geography shattering, politics shattering, I don't think world shattering yet, but very region shattering clash that has been building for decades between Israel and Iran. This is not just the follow-up to what we saw 12 months ago or in April last year when they were firing missiles at each other. This is the final round in all likelihood, because for both sides, they now see it as being existential. From the Israeli side, they could not have been more transparent for years, and in launching this military campaign / war, and it is a war, that they regard Iran, which consistently says it wants to destroy Israel, publicly and privately, in Farsi and in English, which is very polite. Lots of countries will say one thing in their own language and another in English, and Western politicians are stupid enough to believe the one in English. So they're polite enough to be very honest about what they want, which is to destroy Israel. And they are, according to the balance of expert opinion, although it's a highly contentious area, I happen to side with the cynics, pushing aggressively for a nuclear weapon, which one wonders what they would want to do to do with. That doesn't mean they were likely to immediately launch it at Tel Aviv, but it certainly means that they could have operated under a security umbrella that you couldn't push back at. Because what you see with other powers that have nuclear weapons, like Russia, is if you start doing too well in a conventional battle with them, suddenly that threat is made. The Chekhovian gun is placed on the table, as it were, and you realize, okay, I don't have them, therefore I'm not allowed to win more than this. So from an Israeli perspective, either in terms of one big bang or a slow grind, that was an existential issue. From the Iranian side, what they are now experiencing in terms of this shock attack, and it's yet again a massive success for Israel's strategic capacity to suddenly have caught them on the hop when everyone was expecting something, and to still catch them on the hop like this, is itself existential, because it appears that Israel is not just trying to take out the nuclear program, which is an enormous loss of face and power for Iran if that were to happen, but it is systematically trying to dismantle all columns supporting the regime, which is, of course, a revolutionary regime, which many people like to try and forget, which swept into power in 1979. So that regime now looks around and realizes, if this continues, if we keep seeing column after column after column collapse, there is a possibility, and I stress possibility, but I think it's not unrealistic at this stage, that the regime could collapse. So when you put it in those terms, wow, two sides, both of whom feel they absolutely must win it. And that puts it in the same category as Russia and Ukraine.
I've seen some speculation that this would make Iran more likely to sign a deal with the US. Like, would you put any weight behind those sorts of suggestions?
I'm very skeptical. I'm not just skeptical that they would do that because of the enormous loss of face. Again, the physical blows that they have received in this attack dwarf anything that Israel's done to them previously. And they're blaming the US for it openly. They're saying, we think the US is party to this conflict, even if they are not directly pulling the trigger. And to be honest, it's pretty hard to see that isn't the case, given that they've given the munitions to do it to Israel. And, there are some press reports that they were in on it and it was a deliberate deception about a difference between them over it. So from the Iranian perspective, can you trust those people? Can you lose that much face and maintain popular support at home? From the Israeli perspective, even if the Americans believe that a deal can be done with an entity which had signed a deal previously, and some would say it was sticking to it and it was it was all good. Others would say they were not sticking to it and were secretly preparing a weapon in the background, or that the deal that was signed was such a poor deal that they would have ended up with a nuclear weapon eventually anyway. And again, I'm not going to get into the debate on that, but there are very credible views on all sides rather than just one. Mm-hmm. Can the US really trust them? Because once you come back from this, don't you have the incentive to really try and run for it again, run for that finishing line, get that touchdown? And are the Israelis really going to trust Iran after this? If they say, pinky swear, we don't mean to destroy you anymore. Our 1979 revolution is no longer a fundamentalist revolution aimed at remaking, first of all, the Middle East and then the wider world, which it overtly says it is if you read their literature. We've decided we just want to live in peace with our neighbors. It's a very attractive thing to believe because it means you don't have to have more war or rearmament or geopolitical tensions or all the kind of things that get in the way of a nice Western middle-class lifestyle. But that doesn't make it true. So from all sides of that, I'm skeptical. And then we have to bring in one other angle. And this segues to the second part of your first question, how this ties in more broadly. It's not just a regional issue. This is not just Israel versus Iran. And it's not just Iran versus the broader region, because, by the way, it is pretty much the broader region, with the exception of maybe Qatar or maybe Oman, and obviously Hezbollah, Syria, which has now changed sides in the flux that's happening there now. Most of the rest of the region is against Iran, even if not with Israel. This particular regional conflict, on top of the world's major energy reserves, sits alongside a larger great game, two capital G's there, between the US on one hand, and on the other hand, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and an assorted sundry of on again, off again fellow travelers for basically, hegemony for the 21st century. That's pretty much what they're playing for. That's the game. I'm saying the US, and you could say the US plus the West, but that itself is a debatable point. Who's genuinely really in that team anymore? Given, the Trump presidency and some of the contractual demands that he's now putting down on the West to say, if you are on our team, here are the new rules and regulations and the new payment schedule for it. But that means within the Middle East, Russia has a say, which is, of course, tied up with Ukraine, excuse me. Mm-hmm. And China has a say because it's a huge buyer of Iranian oil, which it shouldn't be because that's supposed to be sanctioned. Mm-hmm. But of course, we have this nice international regime that we're all supposed to be complying with. And in reality, we don't. Rules are broken by everyone all over the world all the time. And China is buying Iranian oil, rebadged as somebody else's, and everyone in the industry knows it. Mm-hmm. So then you put the US and Israel and Iran and Russia and China all in the same plot, or in the same pot and plot. And you have other flashpoints, such as India, Pakistan nearby, which has, of course, erupted recently. You have North Korea, South Korea. You have China, Taiwan, China and the South China Sea, China and Japan, Russia and Ukraine. You have North Africa. You have the Middle East and various different vectors there. And it starts to get incredibly convoluted, incredibly conflated, very complex, and absolutely crucial to understand. And yet, because it is so difficult to understand and it cuts across disciplines, you find most people have real difficulty commentating on it with any degree of accuracy or foresight. Because you can be an expert on financial markets. What makes you think you understand this? You can be an expert on the Middle East. What makes you think you understand China? You could be an expert on China and the Middle East and financial markets. Do you understand anything to do with the military? You can be an expert on all of them. How about Russia and Ukraine? You have to keep throwing lots and lots of things into the mix and trying to create some kind of methodological amalgam of all of them to have any real view on what is happening, why it's happening, and what that means about what might, and I stress might, happen next. And that's what I do.
Good news, everyone. My book about GameStop, the craziest story ever told, is now finished. Well, almost. Still waiting for the final draft. So, in the meantime, I think you should look at pre-ordering it or any one of the multiple fantastic, beautiful t-shirts that I have designed in order to sell with the book. Thank you, everyone, for your patience over the last few years while I have been finishing it very slowly. And I am really, really excited for people to read it. Link is in the description below. Enjoy the podcast.